Hello, everyone. Welcome to Consciousness Unfiltered Beyond Normal. I am Dr. Anthony Madison. I am joined by my good friend Sue Will Jones, and can't even tell, tongue-tied.
It's a bit of a tongue twister, that one. Hey, everyone.
Yeah, man. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. We'll be sharing the tools of access consciousness here, and Sue's always been someone when I would look at, he actually worked on me at a maestro class, which is one of the most advanced classes that Dr. Dane here and Gary Douglas offer in Access Consciousness. And I remember it was right before a 7-day event called End of Fight. And when you worked on me energetically doing the SOP energy, it helped me to recognize where I was fighting for and against so many things in my life. And it created this space in my universe where I was like, I don't have to fight anymore. And so between that, and I always loved how you asked questions in class. And your questions were never really about personal problems. Your questions were about like trying to discover like literally what else was possible. For not only just things here, but like things beyond. So I've always been very curious about you. I've always wanted to spend some time with you. So thank you for being on here. And I'm hoping that we can sort of explore your universe and how the tools have helped you and changed your life. So thank you.
Thanks, Anthony. And, it's always interesting to, hear things from other people's perspectives.
Yeah.
Because, so thank you. And
yeah, my pleasure.
I think, you talking about the Symphony of Possibility sessions, it's like, it's I guess a great place to start, because like for me, I'd say energy's always been that, the loudest thing in my world. And before I had the tools of access, I had no bloody clue what to do with all of that awareness of energy, but it's definitely been there, present like throughout my whole life, as I'm sure it has been, with you as well.
Yeah. So say more about that. What did you do? Like, what was your day job before Access? I know you're a facilitator, an Access facilitator, you're an XMen facilitator. Like, what was your day job? How did you create money and a livelihood before Access? Like, what did you do?
Well, I mean, when I left school, I pretty much went traveling, and, I just thought I wanted to see, more of the world and experience different things. And I was also teaching surfing, actually. So
Right.
I was basically a hippie that would, teach surfing in the summer and go traveling in the winter. And yeah, that was kind of that. So, and then, yeah, I guess pretty quickly, really, I sort of realized that, what I thought I would find in all of that kind of stuff, like, meditation, and then also what I was sort of seeking, traveling and everything, I didn't really find, and I'd always been looking for something different. And when I actually came across the tools of access, it had a really different, space to it, a different energy. And I was like, whatever this is, I want to know more about it.
Nice. How did you get exposed to it? Where were you? What were you doing at that time where it came across your universe?
Well, actually, my partner in crime, Tiffany Brennan, she ran my bars for the first time. We met in Sydney, in Bondi, where I was teaching surfing. And, I probably would have had my bars run maybe 10 times before, I feel like I really acknowledged the change that it had started to create in my world. And then I saw I think it was an advert on Facebook for Gary and Dane were coming to Brisbane, Australia to do a foundation class. And it was just this huge thing in my world, that class, I need to be there. And that was kind of like the beginning of the journey, I guess.
Nice. So what would you say? So once you got there and once you showed up, did it sort of like match the energy of what was permeating through your whole body and being throughout your life? And you tried to find that with traveling the world, doing meditation, but at that first class that you went to live, was it like, whoa, like, can you say more about that?
Yeah, the one thing that I actually specifically remember from that class was standing at the back of the room and just like, I guess pulling energy. I didn't even really know what that was at that time, but without even saying anything, Gary just like pointed to me and he was like, "You've got a question." And
Yeah.
so I found myself at the mic and just like, asking stuff, but to me, that was like this acknowledgement of this awareness of energy that no one had ever been in my life before. And
Mhm.
like that, like, I guess, yeah, it was just, it was just the beginning, but it was like such a huge change because it was like, I didn't know that there was anyone else out there that really perceived things like that in the same way. And so to be kind of like acknowledged for that awareness of energy and then also to be able to start to communicate in that way was just like such a big change and shift.
So, as a kid growing up with like this awareness of energy, what did that actually look like for you? Like, yeah, and what was that like for you?
Usually being extremely kind of like shy and not very engaged because I know, like you're also an X-Men facilitator, and for a lot of X-Men it's like they're aware of uh, a lot of the unspoken stuff, and so you can be having a conversation with someone, you're aware of what's going on in their head or in their world that they're not necessarily saying, and it
Yeah,
doesn't match what's coming out of their mouth. So, it can be really confusing, and you don't really know what to do with it all. And it's like it's quite a lot of information as opposed to what we're taught, communication is and everything. So,
mhm.
yeah, I had a lot of difficulty kind of expressing myself, being present in conversations, and just pretty much like socially awkward for a lot of my years growing up.
Wow. And so, how would you say like life is different now than how long have you been doing Access now? What?
It's probably been coming up to like 10 years, I'd say, since, that
Okay.
first bars session. And yeah, I would just say like way more ease with being me, even if that's a little bit weird and different and not what most people are used to. But being able to actually use what I thought was so wrong about me, all of these things that I'd decided because I was different and I didn't fit in, I had to hide them. Whereas like now it's like, this is something that I can actually use to create and explore like what it is that, I would like to
Yeah.
choose and create, not sort of making everyone else's realities, greater than what's available to me.
Nice. And what would you say, like over the last 10 years, what were besides the bars? And for those of you who don't know what the bars are, who may be listening, the bars are basically these 32 points on your head that deals with these bars of energy that run from one side of the brain to the other. And when we lightly contact these different points, they just have this magical way, just to speak in layman terms, it's just sort of like regulating your brain and just changing things in your life that it just helps remove the unconsciousness and anti-consciousness in certain areas like healing, sadness and joy, money, your points of view about your body, sexuality. I mean, the list goes on, and it's really so much more than that. But I don't want to freak too many people out. This is beyond normal, and I'm used to freaking people out. But I'll tell you what. I mean, there have been people who've been suicidal and the bars that changed their life. There have been people who have lived on antidepressants and anti-anxiety meds that are no longer on those medications. And so I know you've used the bars, and that was a big go-to for me as well and my children. What other tools did you use that were sort of like maybe your personal foundation in your journey with Access that actually helped you to access more of you?
Yeah, well, I mean, shortly after, doing that first foundation class, I went to a 7 day in New Zealand, and you were there. And at that class, Gary asked me, "Are you autistic?" And I got a big yes. And that was kind of like the beginning of me really exploring these X-Men materials that we're both, now facilitators of. And I'd say those tools were really what started to give me. I was just beginning to use them for myself because they were working so well. I was getting so much more clarity and like starting to actually trust myself with what I knew rather than just kind of swimming in everyone else's universe, you
Yeah.
know. So there are a lot of them. Like one of them is, who does this belong to? For all of the thoughts, feelings, and emotions. It's like asking that question, and Gary, the founder of Access, mentions that for most people, they need to do it, for 3 days nonstop, and for XMen, they need to do it for 6 months.
Yeah.
So, I really started to use that tool. One of the other ones was actually what we tend to do when we're sort of around other people is like match the sort of zone or the space that they are.
Mm.
And one of the things that Diva really spoke a lot about was expanding the zone and the space that you are, so that you're not the effect of all of that, and just constantly kind of expanding your zone to be the space that creates actual ease for you and your body. And that's one that I used a lot as well. And then the real kind of kicker for anything, I guess, in your life that you want to create is this piece about choice,
Mm.
and that recognition that choice creates your life. And yeah, so starting to choose different things, and seeing what that created, and going, well, okay, I could choose anything here. Like, what would
Mm.
I really like my life to be like, and what would I like to have and create and generate? So
Beautiful.
yeah.
Beautiful. So can you say more about the X-Men? I mean, there are a lot of available resources in Access Consciousness, and the X-Men classes is another part. And all the different resources have their own unique energies to them. Say more about the X-Men classes.
Yeah, I'm just gonna have to pull my earphones out because my battery's dying. So give me one
No
sec.
worries.
Hopefully that's okay. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, so the X-Men is kind of like basically the information came about from Gary and Dane working with kids that had been labeled with disabilities, and what they basically found was that these kids actually had these different abilities, but no one was looking at it from that place. They were looking at like, what's wrong with these people? How do we medicate them? How do we make them fit in and be normal? But Gary and Dane being different, willing to look from a different point of view, were like, wow, there's something different about these kids. And it's like, what would be possible if we were actually willing to kind of like take a step into their world and see what might be possible from that place? And so that's kind of how the X-Men material started to get created. And the X-Men reference is an affectionate kind of reference to the X-Men movies.
Yeah.
A bunch of misfits that have all these different capacities and abilities, and it's just really grown from there. And our good friend Diva Diaz is someone who really kind of like, I guess, pioneered it in a way. I think
Yeah.
Gary and Dane were like, all right, we're taking it out of what we're going to do in class, and Diva was like, no, I love this stuff, it's amazing, it's given me so much freedom. And so
Yeah.
she really kind of took it on, and here we are today with amazing X-Men facilitators all around the world.
Yeah. Awesome. Wow, this is so cool. What, this might be a little bit okay. So one of the greatest gifts I know Gary Douglas has been for me personally is like he has this amazing capacity, as well as a lot of other capacities, but he has this way of being able to speak. When he speaks to a person, he speaks to their whole being, right? Whereas like we may only see like bits and pieces of ourselves. And most of the time for me, it's always the things that I judge myself for the most. But one of the things he's been for me is he's been able to speak. He has this way of speaking to my entire being, and it invites me to choose more. Could you talk a little bit about how he's been that way for you a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a great observation, and maybe you can say a bit more about it too. I guess, like, for me, it was, you know, like that first interaction that I spoke of with Gary, of, you know, without saying anything, him acknowledging an energy that I was being and kind of addressing that. And it's like, as X-Men, when we communicate, we tend to do like like a whole picture, like or like a whole. It's like it's way more than just the words. There's like all of these different elements that create an interaction, an engagement, a communication, and so it's like when you're willing to include all of that, you're being the acknowledgement that that other person, you know, if they're willing to have it, you know, can receive about them. And so I think that is really, you know, one of the parts that, that especially Gary Vee's with a lot of people is he's willing to he's willing to include everything about them and not
Yeah.
like not exclude, you know, pieces and parts which most people do in order to, you know, talk or communicate. But
Yeah.
yeah, can you say a bit more, Anthony, about what that is for you? Because I get you have a bit of a different awareness with that.
No, well, I mean, like he has his way of like if you look at a tree, for example, he speaks to the whole tree. He doesn't speak to like just the individual branches. So I know that like when he would speak into my universe, he would say things to me that I wasn't able to perceive. It was something that would be like more of a fantasy or something that I thought that was a possibility someday, but I never quite was able to ever access that with all the different modalities that I had studied and done. I've had a lot of great experiences along the way, but never quite accessing what I always knew was possible. So I sort of gave up on that. And then when I met him, he would sort of, very similar to you, he would like, when he would speak to me, he'd be like, speak to me like, with this sort of like that. And I'm like, whoa. And it was sort of kind of like almost knock me backwards. And I would almost want to cry all the time because I'm like, how could he know? And it wasn't even so much what he would say. It was just an energy. It was sort of like the way he speaks is very, he taught me a word, I think, if I can say it right, it's called mellifluent. Like his words just have this sort of like vibration that just sort of like activates your whole universe. And then for me, what it created was this reaching, you know, because we still have to choose it, right? And you made a really interesting point. I don't know if anybody heard it. It's like if we are willing to have it, if we are willing to have it, because I know a lot of people, when you expose their worlds to something greater, and that greater is them, sometimes they'll vilify you for that, right? And so it's like, you know, but he has this gentle way of nudging you to get you to start seeing more of you. And then he has this beautiful way of like creating these questions in the universe to get you to choose more, at least for me. I mean, and he's just been such a gift, and I'm grateful that I, you know, met him. I wish I would have met him 25 years ago, you know, but I'm grateful that I met him at all, you know, and because he has a gift. Has many gifts, as we know, but the beautiful part to me of what he is and what he does and what he bees is that he's able to speak to the whole person, not just their judgeable things of themselves, or even the things that they've concluded are their, let's say, their gifts and talents. He speaks just the whole being at once, and he doesn't judge any of it. And so I don't know. To me, it created this space for me to actually choose things that I was never willing to choose before. And I'm super, super grateful. Yeah, so I'm just super grateful. And I know that he's been that with me, and I see how he is with other people, and I could see how he interacts. And I learned so much as a facilitator, because it's like that has always been my dream. Even as a chiropractor, it's like my dream is to always contribute or help people to see all of them. Because what I learned as a chiropractor is that a lot of people's ailments, a lot of people's pains and suffering is because they have all these like undiscovered capacities and talents that they're not acknowledging, they're not creating with, they're not utilizing. And I just see all this pent up energy that has nowhere to go. And it ends up like creating the opposite effect, which is like wreaks havoc on the body because they're not able to express it for whatever reason, whether it's abuse, uh, just, whatever it is. And so that's the gift that access has been for me, for others, I know for you. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation with you, because you're different. And you're different because you recognize things that the majority of the world does not recognize or acknowledge. And for people like you and I, we have felt alone along the way until now. And so it's like, really what else is possible, truly, not only for our personal lives, but our planet.
Totally.
Can I ask you a question? Or well, you could add more to that.
Yeah, there's a few things you said there I want to sort of pick up on.
Yeah.
Like, one of the things is, with the X-Men classes, it's like that's what we sort of come across a lot is, people that think they're messed up and they're wrong and they're bad and they're terrible, and it's usually that place where they have a capacity that they've turned down or they've turned off that, hasn't been acknowledged. They haven't like fully embraced it. And when they do, it's amazing to see the change start to begin in their life, because they go from like, thinking they're fucked up to starting to create their life in a really different way.
Yeah.
And I just, and like your story as well, Anthony, like I've listened to, some of the videos that you made about like your journey as an X-Men, and, some of the things that, were going on for you, like as a young man and everything. And it's like, there are so many people out there as well that are like, just like both of us. And, it's like, I really get that this is one of the gifts of X-Men is it's the mutation of the species, and more people are starting to recognize this in themselves, and kind of like allow it into their lives, and let it be different and be the weirdness and the difference that they actually are.
Yeah. Beautiful. What would you like to see in the world as a result of just the tools of access? How would you like to see it contribute to the world and into the future?
I it's kind of like it's an interesting one, because it tends to show up in ways that are way beyond what I imagine. And it's like we kind of have this we sort of have this ability to work with whatever we have now to create a different future. And we don't always know what that different future is going to be like. But for me, it's really that, like, following that energy, which is one of the first things that we sort of spoke about in this conversation. And yeah, for me, it's like trusting that I know. And if I'm willing to follow that energy, that, you know, there's going to be a different future available. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but I know that it's possible, and I know that like I'm contributing to that being a reality for more people as well. So it's like, I guess, choosing to be whatever you can be opens the doors for other people to have it available to them as well.
Yeah. Beautiful. So how can people find you? Do you have a website? Do you have places people can
Yeah,
go?
we've got sawinjones.com. You can find some of my stuff. You can find me on the Access Consciousness website. And yeah, that's me.
Great. Sweet. Awesome. Do you have some classes coming up anytime soon?
I do. We've got a Undiscovered Possibilities just like a few days after Christmas. And then I've got some stuff planned for the New Year's, a few calls and a 2-day X-Men class. But I'd love to create something with you, Anthony. We should do a class together, an X-Men
Sure.
class.
I would love that. That'd be good. I'd be honored. Thank you.
That's good.
Sweet. Well, thank you so much for your time, man. It was really a pleasure to get to have a conversation with you, and you truly are a gift to the world. And I just love who you be and the energy that you are. And yeah, I look forward to creating with you, seeing you again in the future. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, my friend. Thanks for having me, and I look forward to it too.
All right. See ya. Bye for now.
Bye.